Hi, I'm Paulina Tenner, founder of GrantTree. Welcome to HumiliTea. Today I'm interviewing Mark Leruste and we're talking about human companies in an inhuman world. Mark, so I know you're fresh from Cambridge. You gave the talk today.
Yeah.
You're seeing a lot of companies, what's happening across the corporate world and tech startups. There's AI, there's companies trying to implement more policies and frameworks that make it more wholesome and human friendly. There's a lot happening. When you look at the whole spectrum, what do you feel? Where is this going?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's really interesting. I think a lot of leaders and organizations are kind of really taking or paying attention to this idea of building more human organizations. And I think especially with the rise of AI and automation and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of asking yourself the big question of what does it mean to be human and what does it actually mean to be human in a digital world?
And what's your answer?
Well, I think really on a kind of basic level, it's making space and time for people to interact in a way that isn't necessarily interfered by digital devices. So it could be creating a space where people come together and have an open conversation about whether it's a project being launched, whether it's a personal matter, that they can openly talk about whatever's on their mind. And I think you're seeing a lot of organizations, really cool startups in this space as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's no surprise that there's lots of activities in the mental health space.
Yeah.
I think traditionally we had a lot of kind of free fruit bowls and bean bags and ping pong tables and beer fridge and yoga classes and kombucha on tap and all this stuff, and that's great.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
But not very human.
No, it's not very human. I think it doesn't. I think it can very quickly become a gimmick. Like almost kind of like totally. we're trying to show you that we care and we're cool by providing this stuff, but we still expect you to work hard, be loyal and all this stuff without actually doing what we really need to do, which is, are we clear about our values? Are we clear about our purpose as an organization? Do we empower you as individuals? Do we believe in your leadership ability across the board?
Yeah.
And I think when you start asking yourself those questions and people start paying attention, then they notice that you care about them.
Yeah. So at GrantTree we have this weekly slot called What's Important Right Now.
Okay.
And we literally have like an open floor and people bring all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Often stuff that pisses them off about the company, stuff that they really don't like, but they don't even necessarily have an idea how to improve it. It just doesn't work for them.
Sure.
Is this the kind of stuff that you're talking about? How do we create spaces? Because I think it's a great idea about how do we create spaces where people actually feel empowered to bring what is their raw truth.
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, the first from the get-go, I've got to say that like my mission in life, or one of my missions in life, is to help people feel seen, heard, and loved.
I love it.
And it's a very kind of clear statement in that sense, that I think that's fundamentally what we all crave for. Okay. I've interviewed over 200 people now over the last 10 years, and I feel like, and also coach hundreds and spoken to thousands, all this stuff. But I feel that theme keeps on coming up. And the reason why I say that is I think you've got different ways of doing it within an organization. I think one way that I think is a very smart investment of your time and resources is to create spaces for people to be able to open up and talk in an impartial way with an external coach who can they can talk about all their problems, personal, professional, they can talk about their leadership development, all that kind of stuff, but effectively where it's a space for them to really air whatever's needed.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that people often walk around with a lot of worries, and when they're walking around with lots of worries, they're kind of burdened down, and when they open up, they can lighten up. And if they can lighten up,
this whole water cooler talk and so much that we're thinking and feeling, which we don't believe there's space to share that. So what would you say to a company that actually hasn't had any practice like this? Maybe they have a few gimmicks, a beer fridge, but they don't actually have a space for people to be
so
real.
they can get in touch with companies like me, companies like Sanctus. There's lots of amazing organizations out there who are trying to provide coaches inside organizations. And I think the other thing they can do, which is often associated with an all hands. So kind of companies will do an all hands annual meetup of all their staff and employees. They come together, and they'll often have what they would call like a town hall kind of conference event. Yes. But in fact, I think you could do this on a much more kind of regular basis, where you would have to have sort of agreements and frameworks and around how it's going to take part. But effectively, you should have a space where anyone can challenge anyone at any given point and just express about why I'm concerned. Now, one thing that would set up is that it's okay to express yourself. It's okay to say what you're not happy about, but it's not okay to expect to get what you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of the times where people find hard to understand that, whether that's in relationships, whether that's at work, whether that's in our lives, in our families. I think it's really important that we can have, that we feel that we are able to be supported in speaking about what we don't feel is right, or that we have a desire, a wish, or a need. But I think where people go wrong is that they expect that. And if they say it and they don't get it, then what's the point of saying it? That gets in that really vicious circle of there's no point in me speaking up about it because they won't do anything about it. The point is not about whether they do something or not about it, is that you got to express yourself and that you gave an opportunity to your colleagues, to your peers, to your managers, to your leaders, whatever, to have heard you. Now, whether they do something or not, that's unfortunately out of your hands. But you can't give up by saying there's no point because everything we say lands on, blocked ears and all this kind of stuff.
Fertile ground, So do you think it's really teaching people the empowerment and emotional maturity to really, being able to stand for yourself makes a huge difference?
Yeah, I think it can be easy to simplify it almost to that statement. I think if you look at a really interesting project that Google did back in 2012 called the Aristotle Project, and they basically studied highly effective teams within Google and less effective teams within Google to try and understand what makes an effective team. What basically, if you could boil down the elements of what makes great teams. And a few things they found that was really interesting is that one of them, that leaders' teams are most likely preoccupied by results and bottom line and numbers, whereas team members are more preoccupied about how the team is doing and how the team is working. So it's not so much about who is in the team, but rather how the team is working together. That was like a big finding. And then they came up with like these 5 elements that make a highly successful and productive team. And one of them was psychological safety. So psychological safety is effectively knowing that within this team structure, within this organization, within this dynamic, whether that's a relationship of 2 or a team of 10 or even like 200, whatever, that you are able to express your concerns in a safe way where you do not fear repercussions, whether that's humiliation, retaliation, and that you can raise your hand and effectively say, I don't know how to do what you're asking of me, or I need to have more resources, or I'm struggling here, or I need help. Now, unless you have psychological safety within your organization, your team, it's going to be very difficult to get people to open up and talk to you about what's really happening. Now, I've had conversations with organizations, and I really have to catch myself not to judge organizations and leaders. And I think...
Why not?
Well, because I think it's very easy to judge leaders, and it's very easy to judge organizations when in fact, like yourself, if you lead an organization, it's not black and white. It's hard. It's very vulnerable. It's very hard. You try your best. Sometimes you fail and it feels vulnerable. And I've got a story to illustrate this. It was like a few years ago. I was going to run a workshop for a really cool company, really cool organization. And just before running the workshop, the team leader takes me aside and basically asks me, oh, by the way, what are you going to do during your workshop? Like, I know
let me surprise you.
I know you're coming in, but like, what are you actually doing? And I said, look, I said what I always say, which is, I'm here to help your organization, your team, basically discover and unlock their purpose, and so they can do work that matters, and they feel excited to come Monday morning. And she's like, okay, cool, because I was afraid you're going to get to talk about their feelings, and we just don't have time for that.
But no time for feelings.
Yeah, but you see, in that moment, what happened is that I went, it was really quick for me to judge her, but then I thought, it's because it's really vulnerable and scary. So
are we paranoid talking about our feelings?
Yeah, I think it's not even like, I think it's as leaders, it's very vulnerable to be able to say, I may not have everything right. I may not know everything. And so if a leader can then step away from having to know all the answers, have to step away from the ego, step away from having to look good, and actually go, because some of the most powerful and compelling leaders I've come across are people say, I don't know. But I know you're the right team to find the solution to this, and we're going to find it. Like people who can actually stop and say, that's a great question, or I'm sorry, that was not my intention, or I can see how that affected you, and I hadn't thought about it. Thank you for sharing that with me. People can acknowledge the humanity in others, I think makes them much more compelling leaders. So I think effectively it's be able to understand, and this is the truth, is that if the leadership aren't on board, it's a very, very difficult task to create psychological safety within an organization, because although yes, it's a grassroots movement that also comes in culture is shaped by everyone within an organization. If you have a systematic approach from the top, from leadership that basically shuts down any initiative around vulnerability, psychological safety, humility, it's going to be very difficult to co-create that in that ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's even more than that. Other than shutting it down, we ought to be starting the conversation about mental health.
Yeah.
We ought to be starting the conversation about weakness, about how we can't be full on all the time.
Yeah.
I remember one of my last taboos that I decided to break, because we talk about dating, our sex lives at work, everything.
Yeah.
There was one thing I was afraid to talk about, and that was boredom. And so we used to have those sessions where somebody would pick a topic. We actually still have them, and like run with it, do it like a TEDx style.
Cool.
And I decided to pick up a topic of, when do we get bored at work? What do we do about boredom? And it felt like in that session, people were actually, I felt supported in my own boredom that crops up as well as a founder. And it just felt like, wow, not only can I actually talk about this and not be paranoid that like, if I'm not on and super motivated all the time, how can I expect other people to be? But I can actually receive also support and acknowledgement. Well, of course, you've been here the longest. Like, of course, you're going to get bored sometimes. So it was just so refreshing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's also just being honest. There was like, I remember I was doing this work. She's amazing. She's called Sophie Miller. And I got to co-lead this program with her over 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, in 12 weeks, every week and most weekends, we would get to work together. And there were moments where I would come in on a Tuesday night and we would check in with each other, like, how you doing? Like, how you feeling? And I'd be like, I don't want to be here. Like, I'm absolutely shattered, or I'm ill, or I'm whatever.
Yeah.
And she'd be
or
like,
a crisis, or I have somebody dying in my family.
Whatever the reason, right? And it's and she'd be like, thanks for letting me know. And what do you need from me? And I'd be like, well, just being able to say that was okay. And like, okay, we've got a job to do. Let's get the job done. But it's just being able to be honest about what's present, what's here.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's like, sometimes I work with leaders, and, this one particularly that I'm thinking about, we introduced within his organization an ability to do a one-word check-in when people sit around the boardroom and before they start the kind of meetings, they go, what do you need to say to be present right now? Like, without having to get and fix you, without having to coach you, without having to like...
The check-in protocol.
Right. So it'd be like, oh, my kid's sick and I'm a little bit worried. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing. And then you go to the next person. Oh yeah, like, I don't know, my football team. Yeah, my football team lost last night. Or I'm feeling tired today. I'm not really feeling it right now. Cool.
Amazing.
And you go around that. And I think what happens is that if we can recognize each other's humanity that way, then we can normalize our human condition. And if you can normalize your human condition, then you don't need to put up a mask. And ultimately, my fundamental belief is that being yourself is good for business. Yeah. And if we can start this complete weird, both assumption and buy-in that we must be a certain character, we must be a certain person in order to show up at work, but we separate both our personal lives and our professional lives. Now, for some people, I get it. Like, they don't want to be involved in their work with their personal life, but that's okay. But what really pains me is to know that people check themselves out before they go to work. And that they go to work, and most people have never got to experience who they really are because they're afraid of showing up as who they are.
Sometimes, when I feel into it, because, so close to the city, and sometimes when I have a dark moment, I'm like, okay, I'm wondering how many people this week have jumped onto the tube. Yeah. Usually, bankers, 6 a.m., another day. Sometimes I wonder, do you think it's too late to become human?
No, of course not. I think it's never too late. And actually, it's the most simple thing we can do. We're born human. At least, but I don't know, maybe people will watch this in 20 years and we've all got chips inside our brains and all this stuff. So I don't know. But look, it's a really simple exercise. Like, I can't tell you how many times I run workshops, right? Where I give talks and we just have an open, honest conversation. We're sitting around, we're having a chat. And people go, this is the best conversation I've had in ever. I mean, I didn't do anything extraordinary. All I did was create a space for people to open up, to normalize, to create a safe space, and people to say, what's going on here? Like, what's happening? This started because originally when I was getting brought into companies to go and give talks, I'd go in and I'd give a talk and I'd say to them, and I learned this from when I used to be in a company and people used to come and give talks to other companies, and I felt they were completely out of touch with who we were and what we were about and what we were struggling with. So I made a promise when I became a professional speaker that anytime I'd go in a company, I'd speak to a few employees across the spectrum of the board. So
Beautiful.
high level kind of C-suite level executives and juniors who just joined. Because it gave me a real sense of, okay, what's perceived and what's real, right? So a lot of the times leadership will tell me, oh no, this is how it is and this is what we need. And then I'll very quickly discover if that's true or not.
But is there such a thing as objective reality? Because, you know, when you talk to so many different people, every one of them is going to have their own version of, so how do you discern, okay, when you go into a company and let's say everybody tells you something slightly different, colored by perception and what they're feeling on this particular day, how do you discern, okay, this is more or less what's going on here?
Yeah, so there's 3 rooms I check before I talk to anybody in a company.
Yeah.
This is going to sound really strange.
Let me guess. The water cooler is not a room, but I'll be that. Kitchen.
I do the kitchen, the toilet, and the boardroom. Yeah.
Okay.
Kitchen, toilet, bathroom. Yeah.
Okay. So you go in like
because it tells you more about an organization than what people
tell me. Okay, so what do you look for in the kitchen, the toilet,
and the boardroom? Is the kitchen tidy? Is the kitchen tidy? Is
this a good thing when it's tidy? Or like, do you look for breadcrumbs?
No.
Because that might be nice.
If I see people just walking and just throwing in their glasses, just throwing their cutlery in the sink and walking away, that tells me a lot about what's going on in the organization.
Okay, so the like respect stuff.
Yeah, because who's going to pick up after you?
Yeah. Well, there might be an office cleaner.
But even if there's an office cleaner, I don't care.
Cool. Yeah.
Because that tells me that, it's not my responsibility, someone else will pick it up after me. So there's a culture thing that happens into that organization where I would say, hey, we will have an office cleaner that's coming to do the surface and stuff, but we're all adults. We have to live within this space. Yeah. And the office cleaner comes once a day, probably at night during night shift. Yeah. That means for the whole day, we're going to have a stack of glasses and cutlery and peanut butter and spoons in the sink and stuff. It's not very nice for us. That's one of them. Toilets.
Do you look for pee? Like, seriously, I'm starting to wonder if you look for pee on the seats. But
like things like, how is your toilet? Like, how are you treating the bathroom? Are you cleaning after yourself? I mean, this sounds so weird.
No, I'd really love it.
This will tell me so much more about an organization than you would say words. And same thing with boardroom. Do you leave your cups after you? Do you put the chairs back? These are little things that show that you care. Because if this was your house, most likely you would keep it back. You put it back. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, I'm not. When I have conversations with people, I'm not looking for the truth. I'm not looking for who is telling me the truth. I'm just taking a temperature check. Yeah. And after like 3 to 4 conversations, I usually have about 5, maybe 7 conversations, up until 10. I will very quickly see a theme. Very quickly. Give me an example. Yeah. Well, feedback. For example,
this guy's shit.
Yeah. Like I'll hear the people like, we're all about feedback and growth, but it's not feedback. It's just dumping their shit on me. Like that will come up. So actually, you need just to be having better, like, classes about effective feedback, and that's okay. That's like we've got associates that can come in and do that. Or it'll be something like this is a classic one. I always say this. I often find that this is a bit of a joke. Like every organization will have a set of values. Okay,
on the wall.
They might be on the wall. They might be like on a beer mat, a mouse pad or a mug or something like that. And I'll ask people in organizations, out of all those values, first of all, here's the test. Okay, anybody listening to this, I'll tell them without looking anywhere but me. Name me all the values of this organization. Okay? 99.9%
for sure.
will not know all of them. I've never had someone who's given me all the, even founders will go like, I forgot there's one of them. Yeah. First of all, that's the test. Yeah. How do you know your values? Usually that tells me there are too many values on the wall. If you've got more than 3 values, you're probably doing it wrong. Okay? Because more than 3, people can't really remember them, people can't really cite them. Second of all, out of all those values listed on the wall, which one are you most proud of? Which one are you like, we absolutely live this. We absolutely represent this value. I'm proud of it. So again, after 7 to 10 conversations, if you hear the same values coming over and over and over again, then you know that this culture is doing something right. And then I'll go, which one of all these values are you least proud of?
I like that.
Which one do you live least? And they will always say, the same usually come up. And that usually is transparency, honesty.
That tells you when they say they don't like it, that tells you that maybe it's not congruent with reality, or it tells you that it needs changing.
It needs to change, or it's not. We don't live by it. It's a farce, or the reason why we don't live it is because it's a hypocrisy. If we even talked about it, and so that will tell me again a lot about what's going on in the culture. And then I'll always ask employees and people around the company. I'll say, what are you most proud about this company? Like, what excites you about working here? And then I'll get like a series of answers. And then I'll say, what do you think this organization could be doing better? What's getting in your way of doing your best work? and then again, that will come up, and then that will give me themes. And then I've got 3 or 4 topics that I give and I talk about, and then I'll be able to tailor my themes to that. I'll be able to say, okay, clearly there's a problem around, there's not enough diversity in this organization. Every executive within this leadership team are all white men. And this is really having an impact in terms of like staff engagement and employees. So we need to address that. Okay, so like that will give me information that I can go in and then go back to leadership and say, you know how you asked to come and me to give and talk about X? What you really need is Y. And I think that's why my talks are effective.
And are people prepared to actually go with
well, if they're not, I don't give a talk.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. Like I've stopped working with organizations who aren't, because there's no point. They're going to give me money. I'm going to go there. I'm going to give a talk. Then what? Yeah. Then my reputation's on the line. They're not changing anything in the organization. People walking away going, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
I mean, this happened very early on where a company was like, can you come and talk about productivity? Oh. I don't do productivity. And I was like, but I knew that by having conversation with them, I could be able to feed back what they really needed.
Yes.
So I was like, sure, let me have a look. I don't think that's probably what they need, but let me have a look. And leadership were like, no. They need productivity. We're tired of them complaining about stuff. They're not getting the job done, blah, blah, blah. And eventually had those conversations, and it was a completely different matter. What they needed was to felt like the leadership still cared about them, that they still mattered, that how the work they did impacted the people they served. That's what they wanted to know. So I went back to the leadership team. I said, look, you've got 2 options here. You can either go down the road of doing productivity and you'll fall flat on your face, or you go down to how do we scale caring? How do we make an organization and a culture thrive by still caring about one another, no matter how big we get? The choice is yours. I'm the man for this. I won't be for the man for that.
Yeah.
And
nice one.
that was it. I mean, it's simple as that.
And going back to values, I'm wondering, how do we bridge the gap with because ideally there are values that we live by every day.
Yeah.
And those values are the values that would go on the board.
Yeah.
But let's say that they are a farce, that they actually are not congruent with reality. And how do we bridge the gap between what's real right now?
Yeah.
Because I hate this whole aspirational talk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly about what actually, because there must be some stuff that we live by every single day. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have some good people working here. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's my premise. But let's say that it's difficult to find in the current, you speak to people, they're disappointed, they don't feel seen. It's difficult to find the values that make that workplace tick. Mm. And that's why aspirational values are on the board. Mm. How can you bridge the gap between what's here right now?
Yeah, so actually you ask people. Yeah. I think the biggest mistake I found, especially founders and leaders, if I'm honest, is that they might have started with a set of values. Yeah. Because every organization has to start with a set of values that often is dictated by founders. Yeah. And then as the organization grows, those values can and probably need to change. Yeah. And then the team around that can actually go, I know that was what started this company, but we have a bit of a different flavor now, and that we need to retake a temperature check. And so that you have workshops and facilitations where you go back and you basically go, all right, so what is important here right now? Like what feels real? Like what are we really about? What are we really trying to do and why? Yeah. And then when you boil down those values, what you'll find is that actually, Dent, for example, is a good example, right? So Dent have 3 values, Dent Global, okay? 3 values are be brave, have fun, make a dent. Mm-hmm. I think that's it. Dan, mate of mine, he's the co-founder, he might scream at me if I got them wrong. But I think that's it, right? Yeah. So that's it. So are you having fun? Yeah. Are you being brave? And are you making a dent? Those are the 3 things that filters everything they do. Yeah. And so everyone in that organization will know what their 3 values are because it's written on everything they do. They repeat it when they go and give talks. It's their 3 values. That's the reason why I know it, because they say those values over and over again. So you will attract people who feel like being brave, making a dent, and having fun appeals to them, right? So and that's how you attract people. And the whole aspirational thing.
Is it fine, do you think, to, at some point, for companies that got a bit confused and that gap is a bit too wide, to just drop it and just say, let's do an exercise to figure out who we are at first, and then really establish what we care about? Because it's all about self-awareness, right? Because there's no point writing a bunch of lofty things if you don't know who you are. First
of all, if you're getting a marketing company to write your values, you're getting it wrong. If you're writing values to tick a box, you're getting it wrong. Yeah. You've got to write something on the wall that people feel proud and are a little bit moved by and called to. It's like if you don't have something on that wall that speaks to your people in some way, then you're missing a huge opportunity. right? And that's just like values. Then you've got your purpose and your mission, your vision.
Yeah.
These are just fundamental things that are basically saying, hey, we're on this mission and this is where we want to head.
Yeah.
Are you on board? Does this excite you? We don't know how we're going to get there. We know we will get there if we get the right people.
Yeah.
And does that mission speak to you? Like, if you've seen my TEDx talk, like I talk about that controversial Dutch company, Mars One, right? And they basically were like, oh yeah, we're going to have this one-way ticket to Mars. We're going to send 2 women, 2 men, and no expectation of coming back ever. And they get 200,000 applications. It's crazy, but it's because they go, that's our bold vision, that's our bold mission, we're going to go there. Do you want to be on board? And people will jump in. And I think as often as organizations, we tend to be a little bit beige when it comes down to our bold statements about what we stand for, what we believe in, why we exist. And I think especially in the millennial generation and the younger generation coming up, I think the bolder you are, the more brave you are, the more kind of clear you are about what you stand for, the more you attract top talent.
Mark, you talk a lot about purpose, both your podcasts and as a professional speaker. I'm wondering, because, as a company, we run holacracy. So purpose kind of evolves almost of every action and what the information that we pick up at the grassroots. Yeah. For you, is purpose something that you set, or purpose that is it something that you discover and refine along the way?
I love that question. Is purpose something you set, or is something that you discover? So do you mean like, is it something that you stumble across, or that you create? Is that kind of what you?
So is it almost like, okay, I'm gonna walk over there, or is it like, because that's what I've decided feels purposeful, or I'm going to walk over there and see if it feels purposeful as I'm doing it?
Okay, love that. I think both are true. I think for some people, they just know, like either that's from a kid, or at some point that I'm very clear, this is what feels important to me. I want to do this, like whatever that is, right? Whatever that mission or quest is. And for some other people, which I think is probably the majority of people, I would say, no idea what my purpose is or what my quest is. And then that's where I would say, follow the breadcrumbs, which are your curiosities. What are you curious about? What are you cool about?
What gives you pleasure, right?
Yeah, what gives you pleasure? And actually, funny enough, I often say this where people get confused. People talk about passion, right? Follow your passion, do your passion, and that kind of stuff. But actually, passion, the origin of the word is pain. And so that's what we call the passion of Christ. It's the pain of Christ.
I love
so actually,
that.
I say, what
something that
brings
stirs
you pain?
You up.
Yeah, what pisses you off?
I like that.
So pay attention to what pisses you off, because if it pisses you off, that means you probably care enough about it.
Yeah.
And if you care enough about it and you want to do something about it,
maybe you are the one to.
Yeah, and then explore it. And then explore it. And I think, again, not to reference once again my TEDx talk, but it's like I talk about this. I actually call it a micro quest, like a micro purpose. It's like, we don't all have to wake up.
Be agile about your purpose.
Yeah, maybe. That's right. It's like we don't have to, we don't have to like wake up and go, I am going to eradicate poverty, and that's my purpose, right? We don't all wake up that way. For example, one of my purposes is I want to eradicate career misery in the workplace. That's what I want to do, and it's a bold statement, but I stand by it. And but I would have never told you that 2-3 years ago. Yeah. It's like iterations of my interests and curiosities and kind of flip-flop, and eventually you kind of stumble upon this thing. You go, this feels meaty, this feels important, and that feels. And I think organizations, I really believe that every organization can be a place where people can grow and flourish, and I really believe that every organization can have a sense of purpose, no matter how you started. And I think it's also okay for organizations to change their mission and change their purpose.
I think it's almost not okay for them to not review them, because that turns into something ridiculous. Like that story when you were talking about putting a man and a woman on the moon. Yeah, exciting. But would I be getting out of bed every morning to do that? I think I was happy to get out of bed to kind of see how it feels to meet you today. Yeah, and it feels great in this moment. Even if nothing exciting happens for the rest of the day, this is right. Good. This moment is good.
I agree. Find the opportunities in your life, no matter how big or small, to find some source of excitement or curiosity or pain in what you're doing, because that is going to give you, I mean, it's almost like, again, I used to work with founders, entrepreneurs and coaches and speakers and that kind of stuff. And they'd try and find their niche, like who are my audience, who are my people? And they'd have, but I could do this and I could do that and I could do this. And I'd be like, okay, cool. I used to call it like you're niching a roundabout is what I used to call it.
Niching a roundabout.
Yeah, because I used to be like, you're just going around this roundabout and you're seeing all these exit signs and you're saying, I'm not going to take this exit. I'm not going to take this exit. So what you're doing, you're driving around this freaking roundabout. Meanwhile, you see your colleagues, your peers, your friends taking down an avenue, doing well, whatever that means to them. And you're going, oh, if only I'd taken that avenue, but you don't. Because you sit there and you just keep on going on about it.
Waiting for the...
so commit to one. Yeah. Commit to one. See how it feels.
Blizzard from the heavens to tell me what...
Exactly, or a sign, right?
Yeah. And to me, it's also like, if I'm not able to really tune into, okay, does this moment feel purposeful and aligned with my truth, then I'm not sure if it makes sense for me to set out some grandiose purpose. And if I'm ever going to feel passionate about something so distant, if I don't have the... kind of attunement to feel into would it feel exciting to go left or to go right?
Yeah, and also, then you could argue also that I do believe that for a purpose to gather people around, it needs to be a compelling purpose that actually drives us towards something, right? Yeah. Like even if it's this project, you could say, right, okay, let's create this video show, this podcast, and you can have people that galvanize around and want to help. We might give you some tips and that kind of stuff. But I think ultimately, I really find it fascinating when you look at organizations who do something disruptive or innovative, and especially in an intention of caring for others. Yeah. What happens? I mean, the perfect example, right? So a friend of mine, Jean-Pierre de Villiers, was completing a bike ride for charity from the north of Scotland all the way down to Cornwall. I forgot what the technical term is, right? So I think it's 1,000 miles, if I'm not mistaken. 1,000 miles.
Easily, yeah.
Yeah, and so 2 days left on his race. He was doing it with a mate of his. 880 miles, I believe they'd finished. He got smashed by a car that was a hit and run by an unqualified or disqualified driver with no insurance who fled the scene. Yeah. And he was taken out in a helicopter, intensive care for 2 weeks, punctured lung, broken arms, broken legs. I mean, it was I hadn't seen him in years. We'd lost kind of touch, but I saw his wife, Jules, had posted some photos on Instagram of him, and it was really moving. And so someone saw that and started a GoFundMe page. And the GoFundMe page, the idea was, let's raise some funds for someone, because he's a speaker and he's a motivational speaker and a life coach and so forth. And for someone who gives back so much, let's make sure that he gets something in exchange. And so in 21 days, they raised £30,000 for him so that he could have some care when he comes back from hospital, and him and his wife can get some support and physiotherapy and all this kind of stuff. But the reason why I'm sharing that is that when we have something that binds us together, we want to help. I went out of my way and I actually said on my Instagram, I said, look, anyone who's going to donate to JP's fund, I will do a private one-to-one webinar, and people donate. We raised £500. I mean, and the reason why I did that is, because he's a mate, but also because it was this great initiative that we could all get behind. That's an example. Crowdfunding is a perfect example of purpose in motion. Mm-hmm. So Kickstarter campaigns. Mm-hmm. Why do we donate to Kickstarter campaigns? Because someone had the courage to step up to try and create this thing from nothing. Whether that's a product or service, the new iPhone tripod that no one's going to need, but it fits in your pocket, sounds great. I want to be part of that because that gives me a sense of purpose. It gives me a sense of community. It gives me a sense that I'm contributing towards someone who's on a quest. We are all hard driven to have a sense of purpose.
I agree with you. And it's what moves us is a feeling. What unites us is a feeling, and very often it's pain, as you said. And sometimes it's excitement, and sometimes it's joy. So when I think about this, I know you speak about leadership a lot, and I see this kind of very masculine, numbers-driven, penetrative approach, which is very needed and also very effective. And also the kind of feminine leadership paradigm, which is about wholeness, about feelings, about holding space for people. How do you see those two interacting these days, particularly in the day and age where people are expecting to feel supported and to feel heard and cared for?
Yes, there's a school of thought that I'm a, just full transparency, I'm a faculty member of, so just before I can talk about it, but it's basically called Coactive Training Institute. Yeah. And the philosophy is all based around the co and the active. So the idea is that in everything in life, whether that's business, in life, and relationship, there's always a co and there's always an active. Co is the being, active is the doing. And so you can't have one without the other. If you're constantly active and you're constantly doing and doing and doing,
a human doing.
you become a human doing. Absolutely, yeah, right. And you burn out. And if you're only co, and you're only being, and you're only, you go and meditate on the top of a mountain, that's great, but eventually what are you going to do? And so balance is needed for both. And
so how do you find that within yourself, that place where the two meet?
Yeah, and I think personally, like there's another video project with a filmmaker called Richard DaCosta that's going to be coming out soon, where I talk about this, and I basically talk about there's no such thing as work-life balance; it's work-life integration.
Blend, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think we're actually doing more of a disservice by trying to. It's work-life balance. No, you will never find this balance. It's about finding your own recipe of what it means for you to be able to feel. I think, to be honest with you, and I'm totally guilty of this, so it's very ironic of me, and I know when my partner will watch this, she'll laugh because this is me, but we consume so much content, right? So like if you've got an iPhone, you can actually see on your phone how much time you're spending on what app, using your screensaver app. It will tell you, like I spend on average like 4.5 hours a day on my phone. It will break it down by, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that stuff, BBC News, all that kind of stuff. And you can see how much you're spending just consuming and feeding our brains. When I take the tube, I'll listen to a podcast. If I go for a run, I'll listen to music. If I'm putting the laundry out, I'll listen to a podcast. Like I'm always filling up my space with content because I am a massively hungry learner. The problem is, and this is from Aubrey Marcus that said this, it's like your higher self doesn't scream at you, it whispers at you. And if you don't create quiet space for you to listen, whatever you want to call it, the universe, can't reach you, can't speak to you, right? So it sounds a little bit out there, but all it means, and why do you think meditation has had such a huge kind of uptake in the last 5 years? And breath is the new thing now. Like over the last 12 months, breath.
Not a very new thing, let's put it that way. It's been around for a while. Right. No, it's been going for that, but I'm talking about like it's become trendy, right? It's become this kind of like, but you're 100% right. It's like minimalism. Minimalism has been around for thousands of years, but it got a massive uptake in 2010, right? So you look at what's happening, the trends of today, and you're looking at breath and you're looking at meditation. Why is that? It's to slow things down, and you can really tap into what's needed now, what's present now. Like, because not to get too deep or anything, but the reason why we consume so much, the reason why we take drugs, the reason why we drink, the reason why we have sex, we can't afford to stay
is that we don't want to be with ourselves. We don't want to be present with our emotions, because what will I find out if I suddenly quiet down and I hear what's really happening?
I'm actually quite moved right now, because that would be my current journey. So I slowed down about 6 months ago. I'm very blessed that GrantTree is at a stage where I can afford to do that. And by far my greatest spiritual teacher was my mental health issues. And I think that all that which is screaming at us from within, craving attention, is a higher self trying to show us the way. And the call to be present with ourselves. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but that's what that's what I really, really believe in at the moment. So really, what emerges when I have the courage to stay present to the entirety of what's within, and particularly the darkness, and particularly the fear.
Shadow.
It's utterly fascinating, and I have to say, it takes everything that I have.
Yeah, because it's easier to numb, it's easier to avoid, it's easier to run away. That's why.
And that's how we're conditioned, I think.
Yeah. 100%.
Particularly, and I think we're particularly effective in this civilization to do it through work. It becomes so easy to avoid yourself, also because it makes you feel good. You've got an output. There is something to show for it, whereas with your inner work...
How do I know? Yeah, but imagine if a KPI within an organization was like, you need to meditate 90 hours this quarter. I mean, I'm joking, but it's, so there's a study that I read, and I can so see how this is going to happen, where they basically were predicting that in the very near future, doctors will be prescribing in-person contact. The same way that we have 5 a day.
Professional huggers.
Yeah.
One of my friends has become one. Absolutely. But people are so starved of human connection, of the realness, of touch, which is without agenda, without, I'm a man, you're a woman, or whatever else. It's incredible how far we've come running away from ourselves.
Yeah, but it's because, we're a massively isolated society at the moment, and I see it, it's...
So how would you say, how can you use technology to unite and to
It's a good question.
Selves closer to each other.
Well, so for example, I enjoy technology for setting up calendar invites and reminders and all this stuff, right? So you can.
Yeah.
So I forgot who said this. I didn't come up with this, and I'd love to be able to give him credit. His book is "Hi, my name is Human." I think it's Back to Human or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, terribly sorry for forgetting the author, but he said use technology to meet in person, then get rid of technology to connect in person. So use the devices to meet, and then once you're in the meeting place, get rid of the device. I mean, there's lots of techniques you can do, right? So there's this thing we used to do with mates where we would stack our phones in the middle of the table, and whoever the first one to check would pick the bill for the whole meal.
I like that.
That was a cool one. At work, when I go in organizations, I get them to create a box outside each meeting room where they put their phones and laptops and iPads and everything in it, and they go into the meeting and there's no technology. So they're forced to speak with the person next to them. Because what's happening is that you sit down in the office space and you're checking your emails up until the moment the meeting starts.
And sometimes through the meeting as well, because it's boring.
Yeah, on that, you get what you tolerate.
So if I wanted to do one thing to make my workplace more human, what could it be?
Love that question. Ask that question to your people.
I like that.
That's what I would do. Let them tell you. And that'll probably be a good place to start.
Thank you.
You're welcome.